So this is how this will work. I'm going to yak just a little bit, and then my pal Jonathan's going to yak a little bit. Jonathan works at Homeboy as one of our trainees, and then we'll open it up. So be prepared to throw questions, and I'll mainly throw them at Jonathan, and then we'll take it from there. So I just want to do an aerial view thing about. A lot of it is based on comments people were saying or questions. And I think part of the issue is that, you want to kind of understand things. A homie said to me once, God is able to get underneath and find where the thorn is. I thought that was pretty good. And so we want to get underneath. Nobody in this church or outside of it has ever met a hopeful kid who ever joined a gang. That's never happened in the history of the world. And so somehow we have to know that, again, as I mentioned earlier, the profile of kids who do join gangs are kids, only 3 profiles. A kid who is stuck in a despair and he can't imagine tomorrow, or a kid who is traumatized and can't see his way clear to transform his pain, so he keeps transmitting it. And then the third kid is a kid who's mentally ill. So it's kind of on a continuum of severity. Some kids are more despondent than traumatized. Some are more mentally ill than despondent. And so as a society, that kind of frees us to go, infuse hope, heal trauma, deliver mental health services. No kid is seeking anything when he joins a gang. He's always seeking something. No kid is ever seeking anything. He's always fleeing something. So you want to identify, what is the kid fleeing? This is where people come in of faith, where you can kind of accompany kids and help them and cherish them so they can find their way to the joy there is in cherishing themselves and others. So as I mentioned last night, Homeboy was born in 1988, but our first venture was a Homeboy Bakery. And I remember it started in 92, but in October of 99, it burned to the ground. And so in those days, if you keep in mind the first 10 years of Homeboy Industries, we were plagued by death threats, bomb threats, and hate mail. Never from gang members, obviously, because gang members always found us as a source of hope. But the demonizing was writ large. They demonized gang members in a way that was just wholesale. And it was a short hop to demonize the person who was helping them. So the friend of our enemy is also our enemy. So we used to get bomb threats, death threats, hate mail. Every morning I'd walk in. Remember those answering machines that you had to rewind, And then I'd push play and I braced myself. I always did this by myself because they were horrifying and hateful, really awful. And then I'd write an op-ed piece in the LA Times suggesting that gang members are, perhaps are human beings and they belong to us. And then we all braced ourselves because we were going to get death threats, bomb threats, hate mail in a big way. So October of 99, 3:00 in the morning, the bakery burned down. So I'm racing over there from our house, not far from the bakery in the parish. It was right across from the church. And as I'm trying to get there, there's a young woman named Lucero, a gang member, hugging me. And she says, "Don't worry, G. Tomorrow we'll have a car wash," which will, I'm sure, put us right over the top, And all these señoras, the ladies from the parish, they were hugging me and saying, also crying, and telling me that they would have a venta de comida. They'd sell food to rebuild. And so we kind of thought, there was enough vitriol out there that maybe somebody might have set this fire. But then we discovered, that it was an old building, faulty wiring, percolated in the office, and it just ignited. But when I got there, there was a fire inspector, an old Irish-looking guy, who came up to me and he said, "Hey, are you the owner?" And I said, "Yeah." "Got any reason to believe why somebody might have set this fire?" I said, "No," feeling my nose grow. And he said, "You didn't have any disgruntled ex-employees, did you?" And I said, "Well, actually, I think we're okay there because the disgruntled ones are still working for me, and well, he didn't laugh. And then he said, "This area where the bakery's located," he's confiding in me. I said, "Yeah, it's known for hoodlums," he says. And I said, "Well, I think we're okay there too, because at Homeboy Industries, we only hire hoodlums, and again, with the no laughing. So we were able to call all our workers, and they all arrive the next morning as the sun's coming up, and enemies, rivals, picking through the rubble. We weren't able to find Danny, and Danny, we just couldn't locate him. So he shows up in his perfectly ironed white Homeboy Bakery shirt, Danny emblazoned over here. And his step is light as he walks from the bus, and then he gets into the parking lot and he sees the smoke wafting through the roof, and he sees his coworkers, mainly enemies, who were picking through the rubble, and he stops. And he just puts his face in his hands and he just begins to sob, because this was a whole lot more than a job. It was his reason to get up in the morning. And the union he knew with his coworkers was stronger than anything he had ever experienced in his family and certainly in his gang. So we embraced him and promised we would rebuild, and so we have. But in 1992, when we started the bakery, it was kind of an exit ramp that nobody had ever imagined. If you have despondent kids in this crazy, violent freeway and you have no exit ramp, it compounds the despair and it increases the violence. So suddenly Homeboy Bakery was like this shining light. People went, "Wow." And gang members said, "Wow, you mean I can get off this freeway?" It symbolized that. So I always agreed when anybody came and said, "We want to see the Homeboy Bakery." So we had film crews, we had Prince Philip's business advisors. It was really weird. And we had busloads of tourists, Japanese tourists, take me to your bakery. And our foreman was a guy named Roman. And Roman was the biggest drug dealer I had ever known, and I knew them all. And he always resisted offers of help. But when his daughter Clarissa was born, that sort of changed things. In recovery, you say it takes what it takes, and the same is with gang members. It can be the birth of a son, the death of a friend, a long stretch in prison. And so once, when he finally said yes to my offers of leaving behind drug dealing and gang banging, and so he was a leader in his gang, so he didn't just work with his enemies, he supervised them, which is a great deal more difficult. And he liked doing that, and he was well respected, but he hated giving the tours and all, greeting the news, hated that. So he and I are standing in front of the bakery one day, and there was a busload of farmers from Central California who owned farms, bigwigs, who wanted to see the famous Homeboy Bakery, and we're waiting for them to arrive, and he's having a bad attitude day, and the bus arrives and is pulling in, and we can see that it's one of those sleek, slick, ultra-modern buses with the microphone for the tour guide, and he pretends he's on the microphone. I mean, "Welcome to Homeboy Bakery. Observe gang members in their natural habitat. Please keep your hands in the bus at all times. Do not attempt to feed the homies. They are not yet tamed." So, "Cállate, cabrón." And so they get off the bus. "Hi, how are you?" I never give tours. The homies do. I go back to my office. Well, I come back later on in the afternoon, and it triggers the memory of this tour, and I see Roman, and I said, "Hey, how was that tour?" And he goes, "Damn, G, what's up with white people anyway?" I said, "I don't know. What is up with us?" And he says, well, they always be using the word great. I said, really, we do? He goes, yeah, watch out, check this out. Busload of gavachos, white folks, come in and they see the bakery and they see the ovens. They're all clean and working. And they say, wow, this place is great. And they see the homies, enemies working side by side with each other. You fellas are great. Then they try the bread and they go, wow, this bread, it's great. He says, why is it that white people always be using the word great? I said, I have no idea. This is the first I've ever heard of it. And trust me, from that moment forward, every opportunity I could find, I told him how great he was just to mess with him. And so cut to, in those days, we would close around 11. So can't believe it now, I'm a geezer. I'm in bed 3 hours before then. But now I was there at 11 o'clock at night, and he sees me, and he rushes out to the parking lot. He's never excited about anything. He goes, gee, you're not going to believe what happened yesterday. So he tells me how he picks up his 4-year-old daughter, Clarissa, at the babysitter and puts her in the seat, and they drive to their humble little apartment where, for the first time in his life, he's paying honestly earned, clean, decent money and rent that is not earned in a bad way. And so he unlocks the front door, and little Clarissa goes running down this little narrow hallway, and she lands in the sala, in the living room, and she plants both her feet, and she extends her arms, and she takes the whole room in with her gaze, and she says, this is great. And he said, I thought she was turning white on me. And he gets down at eye level, says, Mija, what's great? And little Clarissa clutches her chest with great emotion, and she says, my home. And as soon as he says those two words, our eyes immediately fill up with tears, and we stare at each other for what feels like an eternity as tears stream down both our cheeks. And then I break the silence and I say, you did this. You've never had a home in your life, and now you got one. You did this. You were the biggest drug dealer in town, and you stopped and you baked bread instead. You did this. You've never had a father in your life, and now you are one. And I hate to have to tell you, but you're great. And I hate to have to tell you that the very first time I ever retrieved that story from my memory bank was to tell it at his funeral some 6 months later. And he was packing the trunk of his car to go on a camping trip. 2 guys came in with their faces covered and with guns, and they saw him, and they must have said, he'll do. And they executed him. But the question most asked me over the course of his death to his funeral was a good one. Homies would say, what's the point of doing good if that can happen to you? And so I found myself speaking to a packed church. I told that story, and I said, here's the point. That Roman, before he left us, he knew the truth of who he was, that he was exactly what God had in mind when God made him. And then he became that truth. He inhabited that truth. And no bullet can pierce it. No 4 prison walls can keep it out. And death can't touch it. Because it's great. We're called to see Jesus and be Jesus. We're called to inhabit together in kinship our mutual dignity. Oh, nobly born, remember who you really are. It's the privilege of my life to know Jonathan. I met him a long time ago when he was in juvenile hall and probation camp and then in the youth authority. And I couldn't have been happier to see him walk through the doors at Homeboy. The proudest man alive to call him my son. Jonathan, talk to people.
Yeah. My name is Jonathan, and I'm 28 years old, and on the 17th of this month, I'm gonna have 90 days that I've been out from doing 13 years in prison, and you know, and like I went to Homeboy's industry because I heard about the industry when I was a juvenile, when I was a kid, and I ran into Pops because we know him as Pops because I know everybody knows him as Father Greg, but we know him as Pops. And then when I seen him, and I was like, I told myself that I wanted to change my life because of what I went through. And I had told myself that I didn't want to go back to that gang life because I was one of the children of 5. My mom was a single mother, and she was trying to raise all of us in an environment near downtown by the Rampart district. And it was a real neighborhood that it was rough, and my mom tried to do what she can do, like she'll work, but she wasn't there for us. But as a mom, all she knew was to work and try to feed us and give us a place to stay. So I never had, like, my dad wasn't there. I went to foster care. While I was in foster care, my sister's dad, that was a good man, he died of cancer because he got in a car accident and he got blood clots in his brain, and I guess he got infected and he died. So when I came back from foster care, my mom knew that I was acting up, I wouldn't listen, and my mom wasn't there. So she was there, and then I didn't have no male role model at the time, so I just decided to go to the streets. And what I seen was gang members, my house used to get shot up. I was in the middle of a drive-by that I didn't even know about, but to me it was the norm, it was normal. And I would see it, and I didn't get scared, it wouldn't bother me. To me, it gave me a rush as a kid. And when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a fireman or a cop. But then once I became 10, 11, I told myself that I wanted to be a full-blown gang member. I told myself that's what I want to become. So when I hit juvenile hall, I see my friends that are, all of us that got kicked out from middle schools, that were the down vatos, they kicked us out. And then we all meet each other at juvenile hall, and you feel like you're in the little leagues. You're there, you guys are fighting one another. And your goal is to be I want to hit YA. And then from there, graduate to college. That's prison, And to us, so it is normal. It's okay because that's what you strive through and that's what you want to do. And I accomplished all that, And to me, it was okay. And I was like, this is what I want to be, a full-blown gang member. And I did. But as I sat there, at the age of 15, I got out of camp. I was out for 90 days. And then I got caught up for a violent crime, and I got sentenced to prison for 7 years. And I was a 15-year-old, I was a minor, and I'm in California Youth Authority. I seen Pops there again. I was all excited, I just seen him in juvenile hall, then I seen him there. I'm like, man, Pops, but I'm going to prison. And I was happy. I was more when he told me that I wanted to come to this event to Santa Barbara, I was like, of course I'll go on. I figured I was just gonna be his entourage. I was gonna stand behind him and just be like, homeboys, we got this. But he hits me with a text on Friday, and I read it, and he's like, you're gonna have to speak. And this is my first time ever speaking in front of people, so, and and I told myself that I want to give back to the community, and I want to give back because what I went through, I don't want people to go through it. If there's a way where you can change and I can help people out, then that's what I'm gonna do. So I told myself yesterday, and I even prayed to God, and I was like, God, please help me out because I'm nervous and I don't know what to do. But I was like, I gotta start somehow, somewhere, in some way. So if this is my first step to the journey that I wanna feel, that I wanna take, it's I'm gonna go all full throttle on it and go for it, and I see there, and it's crazy because you would go to Homeboy's industry, and you'll see like people, individuals all tatted up, and they'll be like the friendliest persons. You drop a paper towel, they'll pick it up for you. Or like we know each other where I can see you, and it's like I know something's wrong with you. So all of us, like, we ask each other, "Are you okay? How's everything going? Do you need help?" Or sometimes where we're buying each other lunch. It's like, if you don't got it, then I'll buy it for you. It's okay. I got you. Because we're all a community and we try to help each other out. And I sit there like. One of my buddies right there, Ryan, that I know, he's struggling, but I try to help him out because I learned to change my life because I seen friends die. I seen a lot of my best friends die while I was incarcerated. But what made me want to change my life was because I sat in prison for 10 years. The light bulb turned on for me was when I had already sat there for 10 years, and then I was sitting on the top bunk looking at the wall, and I was like, man, dude, like, I've been here for 10 years. Like, what am I doing, And if I continue living this lifestyle, I'm going to one day make the bed that I made, lay on it, and it's going to be a little too late, So I told myself I'm going to just take it, like, slow, like, change my life, and that's what I'm doing. Like, it's hard because coming out from being a juvenile to an adult, it's real hard for me because I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get a job. I don't know how to do a resume. Like, I barely learned how to use, thanks to my fiance. She taught me how to use an ATM, And I was, and I was excited. And then I have my other friend named Juan that he just got out from doing 24 years. So I showed him how to use an ATM, And then he shoots the other guy, and then we're all happy, like, man, dog, I pulled out money, like, I know how to do it. Or we go to to the cash register, and like we use our card, and we're all happy because to us it's something that's amazing. Or we show each other how to dim the light on the phone, or how to read his message, or how to send a text. And we help each other because all of us are struggling. It's just some of us are more advanced than the others, but as a community, we're there for each other. We're there to help each other out. So, I mean, I look at it in life, you gotta enjoy it and you gotta love it. And I'm happy that I'm here. And, I don't know, thank you.
No, stay here. No, don't sit. He will rue the day that he ever learned how to do an ATM machine. Some things are best unlearned or not taught. All right, so maybe you can walk around, and so the two of us will field questions. So we'll just try something different. Go like this, and we'll go like that. The one way over there.
I just want to say, Jonathan, you made this white girl cry. I am so proud of you, very proud of you. I have a nephew in solitary confinement, went in at 22, he's 38 years old. I have a son in this community, 16 and a half. We are desperate in this community to get support to our teens, the weakness in our probation system. We are desperate. How do we get you, Jonathan, to come here and speak? Father Boyle, how do we get consultation from you to this community of Santa Barbara? It's going to come from the faith community, all of us here today. Jonathan, do you have any advice to teens, how we get more in this community? To the gangs, my son is walking with a gang. He doesn't know the risk. He's half Latino and he's half white Caucasian. Father Boyle, do you have recommendations for steps that we take in the faith community?
Okay, so no. So just
I mean, a kid, like, they're young, so they're really hard to like understand because they're under like rebellion, like they're rebelling and they don't want to listen. Sometimes you gotta like bring somebody that they look up to, or like a person like me where they can come and I could talk to them. I look at it more like you gotta start with the young, you know, and you gotta help them out, and you gotta tell them about my testimony, where it's like, I mean, we all make mistakes, but you don't have to make mistakes. You don't have to make the mistakes that I made. You don't have to go through what I went through, you know? Because that life that you're taking is not gonna take you nowhere, because they don't tell you that. They tell you to be a gang member and all that, but they don't tell you that when you're in there, you're gonna be bored. They tell you the fun stuff, what's about prison, but I think we should like start educating our youth that the life that you guys are living is not gonna take you nowhere, and you gotta, you know, help them out, hear them out, and see what's going on, you know? That's my opinion.
One thing I didn't mention last night, I don't think I did anyway, is that we have this thing called the Global Homeboy Network. So years ago when we moved into our current location in Chinatown in downtown LA, delegations would come to us. So I remember we had a delegation from Wichita, and they wanted us to airlift Homeboy into Wichita, and we had to kind of ask our staff, you know, do we really want to become the McDonald's of gang intervention programs, you know, with over 8 billion gang members served, you know, and so we decided let's not do that, because one of the reasons Homeboy we think works is because it was born from below in a specific community and it grew from there. So what we did is we said, well, what if we offer technical assistance? And so that's what we've done. So now there are 147 programs in the United States modeled on Homeboy and 16 outside the country. They can't use our name in their title except to say that they're a partner in the Global Homeboy Network. So you have Braveheart Industries in Glasgow, and you have Rise Up Industries in San Diego. And so they usually begin with a social enterprise, and then they add things like we have, like therapy, case management, navigators, that kind of thing. And so we gather every August for 3 days. So if you're interested, just go to our website and look up Global Homeboy Network, and then they'll connect you to that event. It sells out really fast. We don't charge except to cover expenses in it. But we get 400 people every year, and this will be our 7th year, I think. And so, and people from all over the world who have embraced the methodology of Homeboy. So either they're gang members, or they're disaffected street youth in Sydney, or it's returning citizens in wherever, or mental health or homeless. And we're getting requests from those kinds of vexing social dilemma, people who want to address those things. So that's a way. Yeah. Anybody else? We won't let you leave until...
So kind of in that same vein, can you speak to what works in those elements? Because you mentioned yesterday that there was a heavy emphasis on employment and vocation in the early days, but you kind of shifted it. And when I think about, you know, what kind of organizations do we want to support or invest, whether it's money, time, energy, what are we looking for that you think is most effective so that we're using our resources wisely?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, oftentimes I get asked at things like this, and sometimes it has a trace of hostility, and it says, well, what are you doing about prevention? And I always say, nothing. You know, what are you doing about prevention? You know, and because we do a decidedly, you know, concrete thing. We really are intervention. In the same way, if you would imagine a drug rehab, we're exact to that. So are we preventing people from using drugs in the first place? No. I mean, that's a societal thing. But once, regrettably, somebody's addicted to drugs, you can come to our drug rehab. So it's the same thing with intervention. So there's prevention, intervention, and enforcement. Enforcement has, frankly, all the resources it needs. Prevention is all hands on deck. If you're the proud owner of a Pulse, you can do this, and you can be helpful and beneficial to infuse kids with hope. We always think like, no, I'm going to run it down, or I'm going to tell them, the difference between right and wrong. Yikes. It has nothing to do with morality. Nothing. And the minute we abandon that, we go, this is about pain. This is about kids who are lost. So I recommend that there's a book called The Deepest Well, and it's our Surgeon General in the state of California, Nadine Burke-Harris, I think, or Harris-Burke. And she talks about the ACEs study, Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And so it's a checklist of 10 things. Father was in prison, mother was mentally ill, there was drug addiction, physical abuse, sexual abuse. It's a list of 10 things, neglect, abandonment, all these things, 10. She says in the book, if a kid is 4 to 5 on this checklist, brace yourself. This kid's gonna have health issues and socializing issues. Every single human being who walks through the doors at Homeboy Industries is a 9 or 10 on the ACEs study. I'm a 0 on the ACEs study. I just won all these lotteries, parent lottery, zip code lottery, sibling education lottery. Has nothing to do with morality. The minute we can abandon that, I get volunteers at Central Juvenile Hall who will say to me, this kid, Jonathan, he really needs to go to confession. And I go, no, for some reason, you really need him to go to confession. I don't know what your issue is. And then you'll talk to the kid, and the kid will just talk about pain. That's why he's in juvenile hall. And the largest mental institution on the planet Earth is LA County Jail. What does that tell us about how well we're diagnosing things? Why would we punish wound instead of healing wounds? So nobody has ever met a good, healthy treatment plan that was born of a bad diagnosis. So the first step in your city and in your county is get the diagnosis right. If you think it's bad kids who need to be set straight, yikes. Not only will that not work, it shouldn't work because it's a thoroughly bad diagnosis. Loving, caring adults who show up and pay attention, you're off to the races. That's what you want. Is there anybody in this church who can't do that? Nope. And because everyone can, everyone must. And if you write off Jonathan's generation, people who were in gangs or came out of prison and you say, it's too late, we're gonna hunker down with the prevention set, well, you're gonna undercut your best efforts at prevention because these folks will always have more influence and impact than you ever will. So any city needs to do all three with equal vigor and resources: prevention, intervention, enforcement. And reentry, too, would be another one. Go ahead. How you doing? Okay. I love you so much.
I have kind of a different. So I've heard you talk a number of times, and you always help me with the problem of filling my cup so that it overflows, which is an imagery you use. And I'm just curious because you give hints along the way in your talks about how you don't end up like your heart just bleeding out from this. And sometimes I feel like I'm bleeding out in my own ministry. And so I'm curious, you talked about reading Annie Dillard this morning. So I know you do something for that. So I'm just wondering if you'll talk about that for a minute. Like, how do you keep from bleeding out?
Well, again, the caution is always to, it's not about you, and that's a tough one for us. It's not about saving, fixing. I think saving lives is for the Coast Guard, so abandon that. It's not about fixing people. It's not about saving. It's about savoring. And you go, oh, that's too passive for me. But if you savor, go figure, it's salvific because you're delighting in the most amazing human being and you're laughing and there's a sense of play and then I've never had to strain ever to kind of, or pretend to say, Jonathan is unshakably good. It's so obvious. And so then you're kind of in this whole abundance place instead of scarcity. But the minute you abandon success and saving people, you're going to be okay. Then it's eternally replenishing. And you stay anchored in the present moment. The early Christians never cared about heaven. They didn't talk about that. Because heaven was here, kinship, connection, relationship. It's right now. And that's the key. And once it is, then you're not fretting about what you did. You're not lamenting what you did yesterday. And you're not fretting about what happens tomorrow. You're, oh my God, how did I get so lucky to be here with this person? But once you get ahead of yourself, it's depleting. Once it's about you or saving people, or a tally of how many success stories. Reporters ask me all the time, tell me a success story, and I always go, no, I don't believe in it. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'd like you to address more what you said about morality. And this may be in the realm of firing the God that we've believed in all our lives. Church is a lot about preaching morality, at least in my experience, and it sounds like you don't ever preach that. Is that true? And just expand on that a bit.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we have a tendency to address things head on. We love that about ourselves, but we always miss the point because, as the homie said, you got to reach in underneath as God does and find the thorn. But we're so superficial and we're so unsophisticated. So, this is going to sound silly, but John Hinckley shot Ronald Reagan. And he said he did it because he was in love with Jodie Foster. Anybody old enough to remember this? There wasn't a single person in the United States of America who wanted, we're going to address this head on. This celebrity obsession stuff is getting way out of control. No. He didn't spend one day in a jail because you knew this was about wound and that he was mentally ill. Not one day in jail. This may sound like a silly argument, but that was a good diagnosis. How did we make that so well 30, 40 years ago or whenever that was? And an African-American man with a machete, on the last night of Hanukkah in New York, goes into a house and assaults people. What do we do the very next day? By God, we're going to address anti-Semitism. You go, seriously? Seriously? Clearly, he has a history of mental illness. And, so there are two camps. Psychiatrists hate to hear you talk like that. I spoke to a ballroom of psychiatrists and they took me on. Why? Because they think it stigmatizes mentally ill. And of course, the opposite is not to talk about it. Nobody thinks that's good. Or they think it's about morality. So kind of right after that, I was in the Chicago airport and I saw a young woman with a t-shirt that said, love, not hate. And I didn't, fist bump or honk my horn if I were driving, I looked at it and I went, oh God, we're not even trying. That's what I thought. Because we're not even trying. There's a campaign in Los Angeles, the LA County Health Department, billboards, banners, sides of buses. None of us are well until all of us are well. Jesus would think that was the best thing we had ever come up with. Because it's unifying. You don't strike the high moral distance. I'm not a racist. I I embrace love, not hate. Oh, come on. That's just lazy. But we're not like that, because we want, in our discussion of morality, we want to be distant. We want to say, that guy with the machete does not belong to us. And Jesus says, everyone belongs to us. That's a hard one. And again, nobody in this room has ever met a healthy racist, homophobe, xenophobe, anti-Semite. You've never met a healthy person who held those views. And then you're compassionate for the pain that undergirds that presentation, which is racist, white supremacy. But the minute you kind of say, we're going to address this head on, I think you're not sophisticated. I think you don't want to get underneath and find the thorn. That's what God wants us to do. But instead, it's self-congratulatory, and it's born of how we've kind of grown up. There are good people and bad people. Let's stand against the bad people. No, there are no bad people. We belong to each other, and none of us are well until all of us are well.
I'm curious, what would be an alternative to incarceration for the wounded? I know that there are violent crimes and so forth, but I was hearing a protest down in LA not to spend $1 billion at another prison, and they were successful in diverting those funds. I was curious, your thoughts.
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen, but we're part of that imagining right now, which is, so I can hardly see it, but there's this whole lot of property where we are, where the California endowment is, and where the jail is. And wow, they won. They had already had the bid. They spent a lot of money. They shut it down. They're not going to build a jail. They're not going to build a mental hospital, because they think it will be masqueraded, really, a hospital masquerading as a jail. So I'm not sure what they're going to do, but it's care instead of incarceration, and it's a wildly different idea. It doesn't mean you don't protect people from folks who need to be restrained in that way. And it raises a whole issue about homelessness, and and what if people don't want to take their meds? I have a kid who was texting me today, and it's like he's clearly paranoid and delusional. And he didn't choose that mental illness. I have 2 nephews who took their own lives 5 years apart. They both hanged themselves. Sweet, smart, successful, loving, wonderful. And they had inherited from their father a mental illness. Not for a minute did they choose this. It chose them. And how do we kind of roll up our sleeves and abandon all sense of morality and just say, we're going to try to help? But it's hard, because this kid who's texting me, who has the same symptoms as one of my nephews, paranoid, schizophrenic, lying down in the back of cars because they're after me, trying to get him to take meds. And he's completely convinced that people want to kill him. And I don't know what to do. I actually don't know what to do. But not talking about it feels like the wrong thing to do. But once we step back and say, not all choices are created equal. And everyone in county jail, you kind of go personal responsibility or accountability, or they knew what they were doing. Well, they made a choice. They could have chosen something else. All that stuff is really unsophisticated nonsense. Because then we can really hunker down and find solutions that are really about wound and brokenness, rather than stain and bad. We don't want to do that anymore. And one day we're gonna get there where we're really caring for people rather than incarcerating them. I don't know how much time we have. It looks like we're okay.
I have a question for you, Jonathan. Hey. So what has been your experience at Homeboy Industries with the training? And then also, how has it been in the last 90 days looking at your past and kind of working through that? How's that been?
My experience at Homeboys is, I like the journey because it's like a lot of us, because like, I don't know how that happened, but like, I guess there's a handful of us males that just got out of prison from doing over 10 years and up, and we're all in the same boat where like we're trying to better ourselves. So we go to these self-help groups that is like men's group and then addictions, NA. And the one I really like more is men's group because it's like we all talk about the stuff we went through, our childhoods, and then stuff was going through with our girls and stuff like that. And like we internalize and get to know each other of who we are and how we are. And then how I like it is that like my navigator is Gabriel, and 6 years ago he was in my shoes. He had tattoos in his face, and his neighborhood, and now he's a navigator. Now he removed his tattoos. He's going, he got his AA, and I don't really remember on what, but he keeps telling me like to educate myself, and I look at them like as role models because if they were in my shoes and they were able to do it, then that tells me I can do it. Now they're going to universities. Like one of the homies that just got accepted to Berkeley, he's from my area, and he didn't have a family or none of that. And when I hear those stories, I tell myself like, well, mine wasn't that bad, but if he was able to do it on his own or he was able to do it while he was tatted up, then I can do it. You know what I mean? It's like, this is not the end of the road. And that's why I tell myself that I got this. It's going to be hard because it's a new journey for me, but I mean, I'm going to take it full ahead and I'm going to go for it, because I know where I want to be in life. I want to sit there where I want to help kids or be a drug counselor or even hopefully one day we have Homeboys Industry in like Orange County where I could be like, I could run it and Pops could like, let me be like the head honcho or something, But I like my experience at Homeboys, and it's real welcoming because nobody judges you, You be going on your addiction, everybody's gonna try to help you out. So it's a real humble community and we're there for each other. And I like it. I'm looking forward. I'm finishing my 18 months when they come by, and I'm still gonna stay there. And even if I have a job somewhere else, I'm still gonna stop by and check out on fellas. And I mean, because every time you're there, you see a new person rolling up, and who knows, it might be one of your best friends that just finally got out of prison or finally decided to get his nose clean, and I'm gonna be there with open hands and tell him, hey, and then I could be a navigator and be like, you know what, I was here 5 years ago, and I'm gonna just continue the cycle,
I want them to be in there. Right, maybe one last one.
Okay, you win.
Hi, Jonathan, and hi, Father Greg Boyle. I just have a question. You mentioned you have a fiancé. What are you looking forward to? What are you looking forward to in the next couple months? And I don't know.
What are you looking forward to?
Oh, nah. Well, as of right now, like I just got out, but I like the whole little experience with my girl, with my fiance that's right there next to me. She keeps me in check. And like, she's like I'm really emotional when it comes to like, I get stressed out. Like I don't show it a lot, but she sees it in me when I'm nervous or I'm just quiet or like, I tend to just go like this. And I'm acting like I'm happy, but deep down inside, my heart's going like, but I love the support that she gives me because she's there for me and she knows me because it wasn't first physical attraction when I first met her because I was locked up, so I couldn't see her. So I got to know her through the phone and the way she is and when she's mad at me. And now that I see her, it's like, I know when she's mad at me, and I annoy her when I do certain things. Like, I'll do certain things, or she's talking to me and I'll just be like, uh-huh. And then she's like, I know she's gonna get mad because she thinks I'm not listening to her, you know? But I continue, I wanna see, I wanna see a long relationship with her, Like, her sister's been with her husband for like over 20 years, and they were young, and now they have a family and a house, and I see her and I tell her, like, that's what I want, And that's what I'm looking forward to,
That's it. Let's do it.